So let's embrace it and make it as useful to our students as possible. Obviously, the main concern is maintaining academic integrity. At least that's where it was when I started. So the first thing that I did in class was to basically show students what AI does poorly. Um, it does a lot of things poorly. And the main thing I wanted to do is offer them the opportunity to use it as sort of an opportunity for research and brainstorming, to work on sort of basic mechanics. But I did want to point out the dangers of bad information, of AI hallucinations. So I made videos and I did searches for them, and I showed them comparisons that I thought were really effective. And the example I have that I thought was really a slam dunk was in presenting the short story Rashomon by Japanese writer Akutagawa. I had ChatGPT generate an essay on this story, and the essay it generated was actually about the film by Kurosawa. Now, film is based on writing by Akutagawa, but it doesn't happen to be the same story. So it was very visible to me. I went back in and I generated essay after essay trying to get this thing to write about the actual story, but it would not. Even when I specifically asked it to, it basically just gave me the content of the film and pretended that it was the writer's story. So it gave me misinformation and erased every path that I could have taken back to truth. And I thought this video was very effective. And I sent it out to my students, and essay time came around, and I got my papers, and they were all, AI generated. Well, not all of them. I had a significant amount of AI generation. So this didn't work. This information, and why would it, right? The details of some specific writer, writing 100 years ago. It's not tangible. It's not relevant. So my next experiment was to have them actually have ChatGPT generate essays for them. I had my students draft a couple of different versions of their theses and then put that into ChatGPT to see how their writing compared to the output of ChatGPT. Now, I thought that it would be incredibly visible. Students have been writing these essays, for a little while, but in fact, that's not what I experienced. Essay time came around and they submitted essays to me, and they were AI generated. Again, we still had this issue, and now it's my fault. I sent them to ChatGPT to generate these essays, and now how can I act surprised that it came back to me as generated? And what's worse is now, because I've asked them to do that, students in their self-evaluation were saying that ChatGPT helped them. And what I found is that students were so dazzled by the instantaneous output of this scholarly sounding writing that in many cases, students just adopted the deficient and weak theses that ChatGPT offered them instead of hanging on to their own and crafting them even further. So it completely backfired. And I had this realization that the reason they can't see this is because they're not necessarily fluent in the genre of academic writing. Students only write a handful of academic essays over the course of their career. But students do know stories. So now I've crafted a new assignment where students go to ChatGPT and they generate a story, a work of fiction using any prompt they want involving an AI becoming sentient in some way. And then they analyze it the same way that we analyze stories, every other story in class. I have them in the same week do the same thing to a human written story that's also sci-fi involving an AI becoming self-aware. Then I have them compare. All of a sudden, there's like this miraculous turn. Students are experts. They know stories. Because they're familiar with it, they're less intimidated about engaging with the material. They can all of a sudden see all the complex nuance in the writing. And I eliminated that slide. Um, here I go again. Uh, the students were able to see where AI writing was significantly different than their own writing. They were able to see that it lacked concrete details, that it didn't have that it didn't have voice, that it didn't have much dialogue. It was basically disconnected from the experience that they had. And they evaluated it as bad writing. Conversely, they were able to see that the human written writing was a little more complex, that it was less efficient. And they had this moment of saying, well, why am I evaluating this human written um, writing as better when it is confusing? It's more complex. And students, because they already know the stories, are now, and because they're engaging with this in an authentic manner rather than top down, they can all of a sudden feel what it means to have language being complex in an intentional way in service of larger sort of communicative goals. And that's something that's really hard to explain to students and to demonstrate to them. Usually students want to see complex writing and they say, oh man, why do I have to read this? And it's a slog to get them through it. But feeling that really makes a big difference for them. And because they're emotionally driven, because they're intuition led, what ends up happening, by and large, is that students are able to perceive sort of bigger picture elements. And there's sort of an uncanniness about the AI writing that really resonates with them. And my students, in very large percentages, end up feeling that there is they find themselves intuitively questioning sort of their human nature and what is missing in this writing. And this leads us to bigger questions. Students say that, this makes them think about their humanity. So this ends up being the greatest sort of gift of this whole experience, which is I had started off by saying, hey, let's, just try to be ethical about writing. The essays are bad. And accidentally, through this little experiment, we end up with this moment where students are diving into what the nature of literature is and literary language, and then these huge questions. And this for me is the best part, because taking a step back and then reapproaching this assignment, I realized that the basic questions that we start with in sort of literary studies end up having profound effects in this context. When you start a story and you say, okay, who wrote this? Who's the intended audience? Why was it written? These questions don't have good answers, easy answers in this context. Who wrote this? Well, nobody. An LLM isn't a who. Who is the intended audience? Well, I don't know. It algorithmically imagines an audience. What are they trying to communicate? Well, nothing. They don't have any intent. And all of a sudden, students feel this, and they're really ready to dive into these questions. And they come out with these perspectives from this exploration of the intersection of technology and identity, like saying, okay, what is being erased here? What is being foregrounded? They notice, for example, in comparison, that the AI stories tend to be almost utopian in their version of what future tech looks like. The AI becoming sentient in those stories are delighted with this wonderful future, whereas the human story is quite dark and addresses the complications there. So it has been an unexpected and very rewarding experience to to have the students engage this in that way.